Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Udikang. It's the show where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and the challenges and triumphs within those fields. It's inspiring, informative, and as always, very much inquisitive. Now, today, my guest is a syndicated tech columnist, podcaster, communication leadership and technology speaker, as well as a facilitator and author. He is known to some as the Gadget Guy, and he runs gadgetgreg.com and gadgetguy.ca. He is a distinguished Toastmaster and past district director of Toastmasters District 42, and he is co-host for Toastmasters International Podcast. So please help me welcome to today's show, joining us all the way from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, Greg Gazin. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, Marcus. Thanks for having me on today.
You're very welcome. And I thought I would ask you, because I do have a few public speakers and those involved with Toastmasters on my show. So I thought I would ask you, how did you get started initially in Toastmasters? I mean, why did you join the Toastmasters arena?
It's actually really interesting when you talk about Toastmasters. It's not just the why you join, but the how, because everybody seems to have this great story as to how they joined Toastmasters. To put it lightly, it concerned consuming copious quantities of caffeine. So had a friend of mine, I had a mailbox when I was running a business that I would get mail at, and he just kept trying to coerce me, there's another C word, into coming to a Toastmasters meeting. So one day he invited me for coffee and he said, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, "Nothing." He says, "Good, let's go to Toastmasters." At the time, I didn't think I really needed Toastmasters. I sort of okay in front of speaking to a group of people, as long as I knew everyone in the group. But I was really humbled when I was asked to do a table topic. And for those of you who are not Toastmasters, it's where you're asked to answer a question on the theme of the day and you have 2 minutes. And I can't remember what the question was. I can't remember what the theme was, but I realized that when I stopped talking, the stopwatch hadn't yet hit 12 seconds. And at that point, I put my head down like a schoolboy, peeking up at the clock, waiting for that 3 o'clock bell. And I was out of there and not coming back. But as it turns out, almost 20 years later, I'm still there.
Splendid. Yeah, it's something I noticed that there are people who have been part of Toastmasters for some 20, 30 years or more, even 40. I've even heard of a fellow who's been around for 50 years. So it's certainly a club that has been around for a long, long time. All right, you're a co-host and producer for the Toastmasters Podcast, the official podcast for Toastmasters International. And you produce and host the Toastcaster podcast. First of all, how long have you been podcasting? And what experience as a podcaster can you share with us that we can learn from you?
That's a really great question, Marcus, a dual question, I guess. I've been podcasting for a little bit over 15 years. I started 15 years ago with a high performance leadership project. That's one of the Toastmasters projects where I created Toastcasters. That was back in 2006. And I guest host on the Toastmasters International Podcast back in 2009. And I've been the co-host and producer since 2014. So 15 years with Toastcaster, 7 years and counting with the Toastmasters Podcast. Over that time, I have learned a plethora of things. And one of the things that I really learned is that podcasting is a lot of fun. It's not going away anytime soon. And the beautiful thing about it is that you can get to speak to people all over the world. Some of the experiences I've had, well, first of all, one of the things it's done for me is it's really helped me improve my communication skills. It helps me improve my leadership skills, because of course, when you're on a podcast, you have to use all of the different techniques that you learn in Toastmasters, being able to, be concise, be able to use different vocal variety and using your gestures, to put together things that are very cohesive. As a leader, you need to be able to do a lot of planning episodes, connecting with other individuals. In fact, one of the things my co-host on the Toastmasters podcast shared with me, Ryan Levesque, he shared with me one of the things that he learned from podcasting is the ability to be able to connect with people and to develop rapport. So a lot of the experiences and a lot of the skills that you need in terms of everyday life and business and work, you can all grow with podcasting.
I guess you'd probably say that Toastmasters has really helped you being not just a better Toastmaster, better speaker, but also a better podcaster altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it works both ways. Toastmasters itself has helped me become a better podcaster. Again, you learn to fine tune those techniques. In Toastmasters, of course, you got the beauty of getting evaluation. So for example, they'll tell you what you did well, where you can improve, and you get an opportunity to practice in front of a live audience. But again, you're getting feedback that's helpful as opposed to just critics. Quite often in social media, all you hear are critics. So it really works both ways. And by continuing to do both, continuing on my Toastmasters journey and continuing to do the podcasts, it's helping me grow as an individual. And the other thing I love to do is I love to share these experiences with people.
Well, thanks for sharing your experiences with us today, for sure. Now, the Toastmasters podcast, you have 2 guests a month. How do you determine what type of guests to have on the show and how much planning goes into the interview?
Yeah, exactly. The Toastmasters podcast, we publish typically on the 1st and the 15th. Of course, depending on what time zone you're in, because we have people from all over the world, it could be the last day of the month and the 14th. The guests typically come from the Toastmaster magazine, which is published monthly. Now, we operate independently, but what we will do is we will scour the magazine. We often will get articles ahead of time. So perhaps it might be individuals who have written an article, or perhaps it might be someone who was featured in an article. And then what we would do is we would take that article and use that to go deeper. Now, the articles in the Toastmaster magazine are phenomenal, but what it does is it allows you to dig a little bit deeper. Quite often after you've read an article, you think that there might be some questions that you might want to answer. There are some questions that you still have lingering that you want answered. The other beautiful thing is that you can now take the words that are on the page, and by having an interview, you can now put those words to a voice. And so that's the beauty of what we do at the Toastmasters podcast.
Splendid. You're giving me an inspiration, Greg, every time I listen to you. Awesome. I think, I've got to be just like Greg. I've got to be just like Greg. So you've been so you've been involved, obviously, with leadership development as a trainer and as a facilitator. What makes a good leader? And you've talked a bit about how Toastmasters helps members, or at least has helped you build leadership skills. So what really makes a good leader?
Marcus, there's a lot of things that make a really good leader, but if I had to pull a couple of things, I think a really good leader is someone that helps build another individual's, help them build up their confidence and help them to become a future leader themselves. They always say that a good boss, I hate to use the word boss, but let's just say a good leader is someone that helps people build themselves up so that they can replace you, and help them replace you down the road. The tagline for Toastmasters is where leaders are made. Many people who join Toastmasters don't necessarily join Toastmasters initially to become leaders. Quite often it's their fear of public speaking. But what they don't realize is that there's a whole leadership component to Toastmasters. In fact, I'm a self-employed individual, and 10 years into my Toastmaster tenure, maybe not 10 years, 8 years, I became, as you call, the district director, which is akin to being a CEO of a nonprofit. And at the time, I think we had 265 clubs, so 265 branches and 6,000 members. There is a structure within each club which allows you to take on different roles. You get training, you're trained with those positions, you get hands-on practical experience with very little risk. It's not like you're going to cause a company to go bankrupt. And it's one thing that they allow you to develop within the club, and then outside the club to an area, and then outside the area to a district, all the way up to, as I said, with district leader. And the beautiful thing is, it's something that's continuously ongoing. I've been a Toastmaster now for almost 20 years, and both my communication skills and my leadership skills just continue to evolve.
Well, I think you're a perfect demonstration of just that, being able to speak unhindered, unhampered by the confused eddies of everyday politics and propaganda.
So Yeah. Sorry. I still get, you know what? I still get the butterflies every once in a while. Sometimes I get this forgetful thing and, I have my blonde moment. Apologies to anyone out there whose hair is blonde. It sometimes just happens. But the whole idea with Toastmasters is that you learn by doing. It's a great place to make mistakes. And I still remember myself as the district director. I remember pinching myself, asking me, is this real? And, putting the cliche saying, what's a gadget guy like me doing at a place like this, right? I've been a self-employed individual for years, and now all of a sudden I have these teams of people to work with. Plus the mentorship that you get is absolutely incredible. I mean, you can't even buy that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth the price of admission, no doubt. Now, as a gadget guy, you've mentioned a gadget guy quite a few times. As a gadget guy, you've been a freelance and tech columnist and technology speaker. What are some lessons learned from that experience?
The gadget guy, it's kind of funny. It actually stuck one day. I was writing I've been writing articles for many, many years. And one time, one of my editors said to me, Greg, you're such a gadget guy. And that kind of stuck. Some of the lessons I learned as a gadget guy, well, let's just say many, many years ago, I resembled some of the geeks that you see on Big Bang Theory. And of course, nowadays it's in vogue. But back then, when I was a geek, I used to get bothered and picked on. And again, it wasn't something that was kind of a cool thing to do. And in fact, back then, I'd rather sit behind a keyboard and not talk to anybody rather than talk to people in public. So what I discovered, the gadget guy, first of all, I love to start playing with things. And that probably came from my love of Star Trek and the tricorders and all the gadgets that were there. And then one day when I was younger, one of my neighbors, his TV speaker wasn't working, and I took apart the television and figured out where the wires were loose, and I put it back together. So ever since then, I had this thing for gadgetry. And then what had happened was I was a member of the Mac User Society, and one day they said, we're going to quit the newsletter. We're going to stop having a newsletter because we have no content. And the president came to me and said, Greg, why don't you write something for the newsletter? And it was like, I know nothing about, I'm not a great writer. It's one of my worst subjects, writing and speaking. My two worst subjects are now two things that I actually do for a living. And he said, you know what, I'll help. He said, you know everything about Macs and hard drives, and says, why don't you write something? So I did, and it got picked up by the Mac User Group News Service. And then a few years later, when I had my computer shop, our sales rep for the Edmonton Sun took the newsletters back to the editor, one of the editors, and the editor of the special sections column got me to write for them about Macintosh. And he says, what I love about what you write about is you love to tell stories, because with technology, quite often, technology can be very complicated, even at the best of times. And there's still stuff that blows me away. And there's still some things that a teenager or a 15-year-old can probably blow me out of the water. But quite often when you use stories, it helps explain things. So for example, I still remember one of the first analogies I used is someone asked, why do you have to format a hard drive? Nowadays, it's probably not as relevant because of the new technology, but I tried to explain, I said, think of a parking lot, right? If you paint the lines, it's a lot easier and more efficient for the cars to be able to park. And similarly with files, if you format a hard drive, files will be more efficient and be able to go into the right place a lot faster. Interestingly enough, as I joined Toastmasters, I realized that it gave me an opportunity to speak about technology. And with newspapers becoming pretty much very, very thin and almost non-existent, a lot of content went online. Being able to have the background in technology and Toastmasters allowed me to go out and talk about that. So again, that opened up another avenue for me to it opened up another avenue for me to do what I'm currently doing. So that's how that all worked, part and parcel, worked together.
It's amazing how things just sort of flow. You go from those floppy disks to online, and you can take those theories online too. You can say, well, why should we use the cloud? Well, we need to be able to categorize data in the cloud the same way that you did it on a disk, but now it's much bigger. Go ahead.
And storytelling is so important because, I mean, with stories, when you think of a picture worth 1,000 words, a story is a series of words, how much you can share in a very short period of time. That's even why a 2-minute video can tell a lot of story, but the whole idea is to be able to tell that story in such a way that you get your message across. Because we were talking about this, I think earlier, how people's attention spans are so small these days. In fact, I think a goldfish is 7 seconds, and I think I read a statistic somewhere that I think we're down to 3 or 4 seconds. If something doesn't catch our attention right away, we're gone, right? Swipe left, swipe right, click away, turn it off, you're gone. So the whole idea is that you really, really need to fine tune those skills and be concise as possible.
Yeah, well, that's true. And actually talking about attention, I want to move our attention to District 42 directorship, which you were once did as a Toastmaster for the province of Alberta and Saskatchewan here in Canada. Now, you had mentioned you oversaw 265 clubs. You had almost 5,000-6,000 plus members. What are some tips that you can give those watching to become an effective district leader in Toastmasters?
Got to join the program. Well, thank you very much for that. The district, just to clarify for everyone, District 42 at one time was all of Alberta and Saskatchewan. It got so large that it split into two, so they cut Saskatchewan and Alberta in half, sort of Red Deer North and Red Deer South, and then the equivalent along the river in Saskatchewan. So now we are now District 99, Northern Alberta, Northern Saskatchewan, and District 42 is Southern Alberta and Southern Saskatchewan. In terms of being an effective leader, if we take it from the Toastmaster perspective, is really, really embrace the program. Be open to be willing to learn new things. Be willing and open to accept feedback. For a lot of people, it's really hard. It's also sometimes really, really scary, because it's hard sometimes for us to help put ourselves out there. Right. I still go back, and at the time when I only lasted 12 seconds in that table topic, I was honestly devastated to the point where I did stay to the end of the meeting, and then I left, and then I wasn't coming back. And it was my mentor within the club that contacted me and said, "Hey, Greg, Toastmasters is a good place for you, right? You didn't get laughed at, you didn't get critical, you didn't get ridiculed, right?" And then I came back. Take the training programs that are offered. When you do get feedback on the leadership that you're doing or the projects that you're doing, take that feedback and don't just file it away. Practice it. If someone says that you're strong in something or weak in something, try to see if you can get clarification. The other thing that's great is with the new Pathways program, they've integrated the communication and the leadership into the projects themselves. They used to be sort of mutually exclusive, where you did leadership projects and you did communication projects. Those projects can lead you to take on roles within the club, whether you're the secretary, the treasurer, the sergeant at arms. Each one of those roles allows you to learn new skills, right? The treasurer helps you with budgeting and finance. The sergeant at arms helps you with logistics. President, obviously, leading a group of people. As you move out, what happens is that you oversee an area of 5 to 7 clubs. A district leader, you get to oversee an area. You get to oversee 5 to 7 areas. And then there are other roles. For example, the public relations manager is one role that you can take on. You can learn all about PR, but you can also practice that and use that in your business. And with respect to becoming a district leader or district director, which at the time was called district governor, now they call it district director, that is a phenomenal experience. At that level, you would have already gone through a number of the roles, and it can be a little bit scary, but if you think about it, how many people get to have that opportunity to learn so many things? That's where you take all of those skills and you put them on another level. At the time that I was a district director, I had 50 area directors under me. I had a secretary, a treasurer. I had 10 division directors. They were called governors back then. Plus, I had a group of past district leaders who were there to guide me. So again, it's something that a couple of recommendations would be, you need to work the program, do it at your own pace, right? But at the same time, don't just say, well, I'm just too busy. You see, sometimes people might say, well, Toastmasters, I guess I'm too busy, I got too many things to do. What I decided personally was to incorporate Toastmasters as part of what I did every single week, because it became part of me. It became really, really important. If you have times where you think you're going to fail. Because I remember there were times as a district director, I had a couple of my leaders, strong higher up leaders that had gotten ill, weren't available. There were days I was just ready to go, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to bolt. You need to persevere, seek out help and seek out guidance. But the journey, the things that I've learned along the way, I would never have learned those things. The other side of it is the incredible people that you meet. That's something that's not written in any project manual. These people have become very close friends, and they become very, very close friends. Some people will join for the reason of gaining contacts. Sadly, earlier this year, my wife passed away, and I couldn't believe how many people reached out. And in fact, a couple of my Toastmaster colleagues are now my closest friends. So it's absolutely incredible at what you can achieve, and it's amazing what a community can do when they gather together. The experience has been absolutely phenomenal. Now, not everyone is going to want to become a district director, but at least take an opportunity to take on. There are 7 leadership roles within the club. I really highly recommend somebody at least giving that a shot, because you don't know what's there until you start.
Yeah. Should I say condolences once again to the passing your wife. And I also want to mention that when I joined Toastmasters, I just wanted to do public speaking. Like you said, most people join for public speaking. And now I found out that there certainly is a leadership component, which I've adopted to, and adapted as well.
I noticed that for me, becoming an area director, that's the first position that you go into, just stepping outside the club. I found for me, my growth was exponential at that point, because now all of a sudden you're outside your club, you're a little out of your comfort zone, but you have an opportunity to make a huge difference to other groups of clubs with not necessarily the risk, right? So if something happens, and let's just say you're having a few challenges, you're not necessarily putting the club at a huge risk, but at the same time, it was probably the most fun role was being the area director, area governor at the time. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Talking about growth as a speaker and how much you've grown, and all I hear is you now. I don't know what you sounded like many years ago, except from your description. So maybe you could say, or maybe I could ask you, how much have you grown as a speaker at Toastmasters since you've been a member? And when did you really notice that significant growth in your speaking skills?
It's interesting. Sometimes as you're growing, you don't necessarily know it. Well, I mean, I ran away from an opportunity to present a bid on a significant number of computers to a panel because I just didn't have the confidence. And that, of course, was long before I joined Toastmasters. I think where I started to notice the growth for me was my club was my home club is the New Entrepreneurs Club in Edmonton. And we meet at the Business Link in Edmonton, which is a service for small businesses and entrepreneurs, mostly provided free. They had asked me if I would be interested in doing a lunchtime brown bag session for entrepreneurs on presentation skills and also promotions, etc. And at that point I said, sure, how long is it going to be? And they said an hour. Oh, well, at that point, I think my longest speech was about 10 minutes. So I drove home going, how am I going to do this? I just committed myself to doing it. But I did that presentation and it worked out so well that they asked me to take that session and turn it into a 3-hour workshop. So all of a sudden I started to realize that, wow, you can actually make a difference. Other times I noticed that I had an opportunity as the Gadget guy to be on television. I did Breakfast Television a few times and a few other shows. And I noticed that I was a lot more fluid when I look back. But I think for me, the big one came in 2014 when I was asked, there was a conference called Dexio conference in 2014, where the main keynote speaker was going to be Dr. John Gray, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. I think I got that part right. And I was asked to do a session on entrepreneurship and my Toastmasters experience. So I was picked as the local speaker, and I had that opportunity to speak for 30 minutes on that stage, sharing with Dr. John Gray, Arkady Kuhlman, who created ING Direct, which was, I think, became Tangerine. That for me was like, wow, I just never realized. Now, of course, as I get older, I find my memory isn't as good as it used to be. So I have to keep my notes. But I think if you keep remembering, you keep refreshing your Toastmaster skills, you keep practicing, I think you'll continually get better. So it was sort of gradual, and it wasn't something where I didn't realize myself until someone actually pointed out, because when you're there in the moment, sometimes at the beginning, you're just trying to make sure that you get through it without messing up.
Yeah.
So I hope that
that's
answers
true.
your question.
No, that's true. Now, there's some people who join Toastmasters who already have some experience in public speaking or doing presentations. So what are your recommended paths, say, for those types of people who may want to join Toastmasters, but they've already got a bit of public speaking and presentation experience?
Okay. Well, with Toastmasters, it really doesn't matter how much experience that you have, because if you're a lifelong learner, there's always new things that you can learn. You may have a keynote that you've been doing the same way for a long time. Maybe there's a more efficient way to do it. Maybe there's some content that you can change. Again, with Toastmasters, you have an opportunity to practice it. Now, there are advanced clubs in Toastmasters, and I believe most of the advanced clubs require you to either be a member of an existing club, or be a member of, or having completed maybe a certain level in the club. So, I mean, you want to start with one club to get yourself used to Toastmasters, get an idea of how the program works. All the clubs might operate slightly differently, although they do follow the same program. If you are working on Pathways, Pathways has 11 different paths that you can choose, ranging from presentation mastery to even humor, but there's a whole bunch of different ones. So there's a little questionnaire that you would fill out. You go online and it will recommend the paths. But if you're just looking at getting better at what you do, start with a particular club, see where you sit, because you know what? You may not be as good as you think you are, or you might be better than you think you are. Just get some feedback on that. There are advanced clubs. I know in our district, I think there's at least 4 or 5. Some focus on multiple evaluations. Some focus on advanced techniques. One of the clubs that I belong to is called GoPro Speakers. And our raison d'etre is to try to encourage people who are professional speakers to get better, or want to become professional speakers, or want to become accredited speakers, which is it's a very special designation within Toastmasters, very prestigious designation, which right now there have ever only been roughly 90 in the world since the program started in 1981. So that's what we focus on. We don't do a lot of the smaller things that are done at the club. We focus on the larger presentations. We focus on panel. We do panel evaluations. So that's sort of the whole idea. Start somewhere by visiting a club, get used to the Toastmasters, and then but after that, you might want to start looking at maybe more of an advanced club. But I guarantee you that even if you are a professional speaker, because there are speakers within Toastmasters that earn 6 figures, some of them might even earn 7 figures, but yet they stay in Toastmasters. The other side of it, as a presenter, you might also want to give back as well. So again, you could take on some leadership roles, because that can also help you possibly grow your presentation business.
You wrote a book called Corey OutSMARTS the Butterflies. What's that about? How did you come to write it?
Here's a little plug from a little book, Corey OutSMARTS the Butterflies. I think you can probably see that.
Yep.
Well,
I can see it.
It's funny how in Toastmasters things came full circle, because I started in writing, I went into Toastmasters, and because of Toastmasters, I came to a situation where the premise of the book is about a little boy who is afraid to do his show and tell. And that's Corey. Oops, a little pointing here. And then there's an older boy who helps guide himself through it. So the whole idea is that I call it a book that's for ages 8 to 80, for people who want to build their communication skills. So Corey learns how to do his show and tell in front of a group. The word SMART is actually an acronym, not the SMART goals, but it's a different kind of SMART. And if you look at it from the other boy's point of view, looks at it from the leadership. When you think about it, he is a young leader who helps Corey guide through. How the book came about is a friend of mine had written a book called Diamonds and Silver. His name is Kevin Oxner. And I was trying to encourage him to write a prequel to the book to help sell this book. I said, here's the storyline, here's the characters. The character Milo is way distant relative to one of his characters. And he said, Greg, since you got it all figured out, why don't you just write it? Kevin and I were doing presentations at NAIT, which is Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. We did those for a number of years. And every year we would go in twice a year to teach the entrepreneurship students presentation skills, because they had to give a presentation at the end of their session. So the book is loosely based on the material that I was using in the presentation. So yeah, it's available on Amazon. It's available on Smashwords as a download. And for those of you who listen to Marcus's show, I will give him a download code, and he can put that in the show notes, so you can actually download a copy of the book for free. How's
Great.
that?
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Greg. That's appreciated.
welcome.
Much appreciated. I love writing stories, and I love writing children's books. And I used to do it years ago. I've got to get back to it. And your book has just given me that inspiration. So
Awesome. Great.
any upcoming events you have coming along?
Well, of course, we're recording this. It's not going to go live right away, but in fact, I'm preparing tomorrow for a presentation for a Toastmasters group in Virginia. I'm doing a presentation called Podcast from Three Sides of the Mic. And the reason I say that is because as a podcaster, you can create your own, you can listen to the podcast, or you can just be a guest. So there's lots of things that you can learn from that. It's a 90-minute session, including questions and answers. It will be too late for you to catch it live, but again, once it's gone live, we'll get Marcus to put a link in the show notes for it. The other thing I'm doing is I'm working on a new podcast, probably a blog, and perhaps maybe another book. But what I discovered that through the pandemic and even through people's lives, that people have gotten to a point in their life where they needed a way to catch their second wind. A lot of people call it pivoting. And catching your second wind was the theme that I used when I was district governor, district director back in 2010 and 2011. And the whole idea is that you get to a point in your life and then something happens, or you make something happen that can give you either that new start, that new beginning. And it's one of those things where it doesn't have to be a new start, doesn't have to be a new beginning. You don't have to have failed, but it's about transformation and taking that next step. And I've heard so many incredible stories over the last little while that I thought I would share some of my past experiences, but also go and talk to people out there that perhaps something has happened in their life where they have been able to start afresh, catch their second wind, and move forward. It doesn't necessarily have to be celebrities. It doesn't necessarily have to be people that have gone to the moon, but it could be even just regular folks that have done something that I really, really want to have an opportunity to share their stories. And that's something that I'm looking at doing. And it looks like it's going to be a new podcast. But again,
Splendid.
Still working on it.
Yeah, splendid. I think when you pivoting, transforming, or if you like redefining yourself, this is something that I was told I should do about every 5 years. And I was told that by a jogger who was jogging across Canada. And I met the fellow in BC about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And he said, Marcus, you've got to redefine yourself every 5 years. And I'm doing it by running across Canada. so,
it means different things to different people. I don't think there's necessarily a timeline on it. I mean, I've done some weird things. I started off in IT. I even managed a Beatles tribute band. So all the different things that I've done. And there's even a story about me where if you got time, I'll share this quick story.
Sure,
I used to play, I don't look like an Olympic athlete. I mean, I'm much slimmer and trimmer than I used to be, but I used to play racquetball and squash with a friend of mine, Chuck, who's Charles. And it's like every week I would just get this thrashing. And then I thought, I'd like to be able to win one game. And one of the things I noticed was that I never won, but yet my best game was my last game. So what I did is I took it easy over the first couple of games. And then in the last game, I poured it on and then I finally beat him. So I caught my second wind. It was also a theme. It was also a theme of a conference that I went to where I had an incredible opportunity of meeting Steve Jobs for the first of 2 times that I got to meet him. Absolutely incredible. In fact, if you go to @Gadget Greg on my Twitter page, you'll see a picture of him and I. And if you've never seen Steve Jobs wearing a suit and tie, There's a picture there. And
Nice.
the good looking guy next to him is me.
Nice. Very nice.
I mean, that's debatable, I guess, but there you go.
Oh,
Anyway.
those are moments that you just don't want to, you want to treasure them. You just don't want to.
The words, I mean, the words that he shared, I mean, he had just been booted out of Apple, and he was being honored as the #1 entrepreneur for the previous year. They were honoring the top 100 entrepreneurs, and he earned more than the other 900 or the other 99. But he had just been booted out of Apple. Of course, he had gone on to start Next. And then it wouldn't be until, I don't know, 10, 12 years later that he would return to Apple as the ICEO, where he earned $1. And look what happened, right? Created the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, and sadly he's no longer with us, but he has left a lasting legacy. So there's an example of someone who's had an impact on me, even though he'd never remember who I was.
And that's a good example of someone who's redefined himself, who's pivoted, who's transformed. And it's a testament to us all. So join Toastmasters, become transformed, and pivot your life like Steve Jobs did. So any last words about how people can contact you if they want to?
I'd really like to be hiding. No, I'm just kidding. You can reach me at my website, gadgetguy.ca or gadgetgreg.com. They all point to the same place. I'm on Twitter at GadgetGreg. You can find me on the Toastmasters Podcast.com, Toastcaster.com. Just Google my name, Greg Gazin. That's Gazin or Gazin for those of you in the US. And certainly reach out. Be happy to chat with you.
It's been fabulous having you on the show, Greg. Absolutely amazing. I have yearned for this moment for a long time. It's finally happened. So I just want to say thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out. And I do appreciate the thought-provoking questions. So those are great questions for podcasts. And again, that's one thing in podcasting is asking the right questions. And sometimes you can get the most incredible answers, especially if you word them just right. And thank you so much for reaching out. And I look forward to seeing how you catch your second one.
Thanks very much. All right. Well, have yourself a wonderful and amazing day in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
You too, Marcus.
All right.
Thanks
take care. You're welcome. Bye. And now a word from our sponsors. The Lewis Institute provides an enterprise project management program that does more than just train PMs. It helps support them from the CEO level on down. These courses help certify project leaders and prepare them to pass the PMP exam. The Business Agility Institute provides Emergence, the Journal of Business Agility. This quarterly publication brings you inspiring stories from the most innovative companies. Use the promo code ANALYST to get a 10% discount on your annual subscription.